Hello everyone and welcome to Week 1, Lecture 1 of English 112, Critical Writing and Reading, otherwise known as the Invisible Argument. So let's first start with the question of what is rhetoric? According to Jay Heinrichs, the author of our ever-amusing book, Thank You for Arguing, rhetoric is the skillful art of persuasive argument. It is also the art of influence, friendship, eloquence, ready wit, and irrefutable logic. Rhetoric decodes arguments and used to be the center of higher education until the 19th century, when literature started to take over English departments. The thing that we're going to be primarily concerned with in the beginning is unpacking arguments and figuring out how we can gain the upper hand, or the rhetorical jujitsu, in an argument. Some questions I'd like you to consider are, what exactly is the difference between an argument and a fight? According to Heinrichs, an argument seeks to find a common ground, that is, the solution to the problem benefits as many people as possible, whereas a fight is just about someone trying to win over another person at all costs, without regard to the group. With that in mind, we're presented with the toothpaste dilemma between George and his father. Who wins that? Some might say that the father wins it because he ultimately gets what he wants, not by just shouting or browbeating George, but rather by appeasing him when he says, "Oh, Dad, well, it's not really about blame. That is, it's not about who used the last of the toothpaste. It's about, rather, how are we going to prevent this from happening again?" If you recall, the father gets what he wants not by, again, yelling or screaming at George and calling him a jerk, but rather by conceding his point to ultimately gain what it is he wants. With that in mind, we want to consider a very useful figure, the concession. That is, to agree at least with one point your opponent is making in order to win the larger point and get what it is you want. This all comes down to a question of blame versus choice. If you are always blaming people, then you never really get to what is mutually beneficial. Rather, if you offer choice, you can come to a more mutually agreed upon conclusion. Rhetoric is important, and considering choice is equally as important because it makes us less gullible. We can appear to be open-minded and reasonable when presented with any number of different options or arguments. People are also more willing to commit to other people who appear open-minded and reasonable, as opposed to irrational and extreme. And finally, it's important because people will want to actually act on your ideas, therefore allowing you to get ultimately what it is that you are after. One of the first things that you want to think about when constructing an argument, or when even engaging in an argument, otherwise known as a deliberative argument, you don't really want to just outscore your opponent on cheap points, such as name-calling or whatnot. Instead, you want to get your way by first considering, what do you want at the end of an argument? Do you want to change your audience's mind about a particular topic? Do you want to change its mood? Or do you want it to get it to do something or stop doing something? When considering an audience's mood and how you may change it from something that is less appealing or perhaps persuasive to more appealing and persuasive, you'll want to consider what kind of language you're going to use. And of course, what kind of emotions are you going to try and elicit from your audience? Are you going to try to elicit their sympathy for a certain cause? Or are you perhaps going to enrage them about perhaps the injustice of a certain situation? Or are you going to put them at ease by telling a joke or another humorous anecdote? If you're looking to change your audience's mind, you'll want to consider how extreme the choices are that you're offering your audience. The sweet spot of your argument should always rest in the middle, or as Aristotle would say, lie in the mean. If you want to get your audience to act upon your suggestions, First, note that that is the most difficult prospect because it is based on aligning your desires with your audience's values. And as we know from real life experience, that isn't always something that can easily be accomplished. The best way to get your audience to act upon your idea or suggestion is to show how the action is advantageous and will not require that much work. That is, you want to make the audience feel that it is all about them. Their cares, their concerns are the most important things in your mind. The basic tools to determine the outcome of an argument are setting your personal goal. Again, what do you want from your audience? Do you want to change their mood, their mind, or their willingness to act? This requires that you establish an ethos, or as Billy Joel would say, it's a matter of trust. Ethos, as you might recall, or are somewhat familiar with, is closely aligned with ethics, and that is establishing what one ought to do. It also has to do with establishing one's credibility. The first thing you want to do when establishing your credibility with an audience is display disinterest. Again, this shows that the audience's need come first and you're not just a selfish jerk out to get your own way. This also entails you showing how the choices or courses of action that you are offering benefit the audience, and perhaps, even if you can throw it in, might even hurt you. The second way to establish your ethos is by displaying a rhetorical kind of virtue. Now keep in mind that this kind of virtue only exists in the argument, and it offers choice, and those choices are reasonable, not in the extreme. The third way you can establish trustworthiness with your audience is by demonstrating practical wisdom. Practical wisdom demonstrates experience with a problem or an issue and is usually told in narrative form through a short story. This gets the audience to identify you, and this coincidentally will also be the topic of your first essay, which is the credibility assignment. Please make sure that you read through the assignment's directions carefully, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to either post them to the discussion board forum marked questions or to email me. Also, please note that your quiz for this week is password protected, and that password is trust. It is case sensitive, so make sure that you use a capital T. Delving into the anecdote for a moment. Short stories, anecdotes are short stories that relay the speaker or writer's experience. It is the quickest way to bond through relating and sympathizing, and it is often humorous, though it can also take on a more serious tone.